I just want to do God's will.
The kind of revolution that the world needs is a Christian revolution.
If you want a miracle, you've got to expect it to happen.
You are the recipients of God's grace and God's blessings, and you rejoice in that reality.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Life Today Live. My name's Jordan Murphy. I'm so excited to be in the studios with you guys. It is kind of a cloudy day, but I have the perfect dose of sunshine to brighten up your life. I'm so excited for today's guest. We have Jessie Minassian on the program with us today, and she's going to talk about her new book, Your Brightest Life, tips for navigating relationships, health, faith, mindset, and more. You guys, we're going to cover all the topics today, and we're going to have a wonderful time. So thank you so much for being with us. And Jessie, thank you so much for being on the program with us today.
It is my pleasure. And we've got a little bit of clouds in California today, too. So I'm excited to talk about some sunshine.
Yes, we're going to brighten it up. So walk us through, how did Your Brightest Life come about? Who is the target audience for this book?
Well, I've been working with teen and young adult girls for almost 20 years now. So this is sort of the culmination of almost 20 years of ministry. I've been writing books for quite a number of years, but now I have two teen girls of my own. And so not only am I getting to hear from girls through my website, lifelivingGod.com, but now I'm like in the trenches with this again. And just seeing for this unique time in history for these young women, I feel like can just use an extra dose of optimism. We're living in some crazy times. At least that's what they're hearing from all the adults in their lives. And, we can use a little vision and agency.
In your career, you said you have 20 years, which, by the way, you look 20. You look incredible.
You're my favorite.
Whatever you're doing with your skincare and your lifestyle, I've got to copy you. Okay, you look amazing. But all these women, all these young women are just being fed all of these lies. How have you seen that impact their day-to-day lives as they navigate trying to find truth?
Oh, that's huge. That's such a huge thing. I feel like believing lies is huge. And I've watched, because I've been doing this for so long, I've been watching the lies shift. And I feel like today it's very, very interesting to me. You know, I'm talking to girls all over the country, getting questions from girls all over the world. And yet it feels like the lies are shifting in the exact same way. So these lies of you're alone in this, you can't tell anyone what you're struggling with, the lies of you have to look a certain way, you have to be, doing all the things all the time. And when I ask young women what the hardest part of being a teen or young adult today is, it's pressure. They almost always answer the pressure. And so I have to think the lies that they're being fed have to do with, you have to do it all. You have to be it all. You have to be online all the time or you're going to miss something. And you have to find a relationship, but there aren't that many guys out there. Like all these lies that, make it really hard to remember truth.
What are some of the similarities that you've seen? You've said you've been doing this for a little while and you've seen a shift in culture, but what are some of the things that you've seen kind of stand the test of time that women are still struggling with?
That is also a great point, because I do think there are three core questions that girls are still asking that I asked when I was a teenager.
Right.
My mom was asking, right? It's, am I beautiful? Is there a guy who would want me, who would be willing to pursue me, who would want to make me his? And is there a God who would accept me despite everything I've done? And those core questions we've been trying to answer, I think, for all of history, but the way we're going about finding answers is shifting based on the new technology in our lives in this day and age, which makes it, honestly, in my opinion, more challenging. I'm not going to say that, young people have it the hardest time in history, because there have been some really hard things that have happened.
Some people would argue, but hey.
But I do think it's harder today than it's been in a really long time, at least for here in our context in the United States.
Well, there's just so many new things to navigate in all of this research that's coming out of brand new devices, brand new platforms that we've never had in the past. And we're just finding out new ways even right now of the toll that social media has taken, not only on young people, but grown adults, and things that we really, really need to try to make changes in. And so when you were speaking about those three questions Man, that was tender. It brought a little bit of tear to my eye, because if you're a woman, you really have. You've asked those questions. And even being 24, it brings me back to feeling 13, 14, 15. You know, those questions start young. And have you seen that those questions have even been starting younger because of the exposure to social media?
Absolutely. I just literally this weekend was at a conference speaking to high schoolers and then to junior hires. And I had girls 11 years old, 12 years old in that group who were just like resonating like 16-year-olds of 10 years ago, to where like, yes, like I understand that on a deep level, just that chasing after the carrot of needing to look a certain way, of needing to act a certain way. And just to be frank, the advent of online pornography has radically changed perception of girls, understanding of what it is to be beautiful. So we've always had that desire to be beautiful, I believe, because God created us to be beautiful. And so the enemy wants to attack us in that core identity that we have, just by being female. And because of just the havoc that pornography has wreaked on on this culture, on the world, honestly, at this current cultural moment, what they define as cute, just wanting to be cute, is just changing. And it's not that they want to be overly sexual necessarily. They just want to know that they look pretty. And when the images they're looking at are overly sexualized, that's just what they feel is pretty.
How do we protect young girls? How do you protect your girls in your home?
Oh, that's a
It's
not easy. And like you said, we're all navigating this for the first time, right? Like, so as a parent now, I have a junior and a senior in high school, and I feel like they're the test subjects for this. They're
Right.
the first generation that you've grown up with devices, and we have had a lot of conversations from when they were very young, like starting elementary school, just understanding their beauty and who God has made them, their beauty inside and out, which I feel like are both important. And I am a firm believer that parents can put guardrails in place for their teen. It's not that they're never going to come across something that exposes them, but we've had limits on, you need to be a certain age before you're going to have social media. Mm-hmm. We're going to work together to set up screen time limits so that you don't have a constant IV drip of these images that are going to undermine, the beauty that you already have. We have a bedtime for our phones, all of us in our house. We all put our phones to bed at a certain time, and we don't have phones in bedrooms. I mean, there's practical hacks to try to minimize the exposure. But the bottom line is, statistically, our kids are going to be exposed to things. And so how do we help them have a healthy mindset toward what they're seeing and what their friends are seeing and exposing them to, so that they can make wise choices?
What's been your girls' reaction to the rules, to the boundaries?
What's fun is that, obviously there's pushback,
of
first,
course.
But from an early age, it was like, look, as soon as you have a cell phone, you have a contract. This is not like free reign. Like, if you choose to have a cell phone, you are giving up the right to privacy on that, like absolute privacy. I can check that phone at any time. But now, especially, my 17-year-old, we've been having conversations recently, and she's really appreciative that she's not addicted. She left for the summer. She spent 8 months overseas and didn't have her phone the whole time. And she can do it. And she's not feeling like her life is over. And I'm so proud of her. And it's not because I've been a great parent, but I'm appreciative that my girls are seeing, because like you said, adults are struggling with this too, right? Like, they see the adults around them like, well, I don't want to be like that. I don't want to be completely tied to my phone when I'm midlife, So what do I need to do today to live differently? And I'm proud of them for recognizing that. And I see a shift in young people. There's kind of this undercurrent of young people who are like, no, like, we're going to be smarter than that. We're going to be the boss of our tech, not the other way around. And I love that.
Come on. I'm going to have to disagree with you for a second, though, because I know you're saying, oh, it's not my parenting. It is. Like, you and your husband being able to lay that foundation. Like, yes, your girls, they get to make a choice of how they respond, right? And I love you even speak about the power of choices in your book. But it's amazing the foundation that you've given them, the tools that you've given them for them to be able to use to have that brighter life, you know? And so I think that's so wonderful. I guess if there's somebody that's listening that either doesn't know how to enforce that for their children, or maybe they're, 24 like me and they've never heard of these practical boundaries and they'd like to introduce that into their lives, how do you even start by doing that?
That's great. I have not invented the wheel. I'm learning from others. There's a couple of really good books that were instrumental for me in learning how to set boundaries for myself and then for my kids. Andy Crouch has a great one, The Tech Wise Family. That was great when my girls were smaller. And then there's a couple books out there, and I don't need to go through a whole list, but there are practical resources on teaching us how these devices are meant to addict us and how to hack back the devices, like how to use the features that are set in our phones, how to set limits, how to set a bedtime, how to just, there are those tools out there. If you decide, I want to live differently. I want to have a bright life that's full of adventure, like in the real world and deep, meaningful connections. It starts with just setting limits on your phone so you can be bored for a hot minute so that then you're forced to do something a little more productive. Yeah.
And tap back into our creativity, and your book has really, really been inspiring to me. 70 tips. I can barely come up with 10. What was the writing process? I'm sure you had to have some moments of maybe some boredom and creativity, time, giving yourself time to tap into the gifts that God has given you. So walk us through, what has this season of writing looked like for you?
I am a big fan of giving myself lots of margin to write, because I think it does take being in the trenches and wrestling with those ideas and testing them out with other actual young people. Does this resonate with you? 70 tips came because I have a lot of embarrassing stories in my life. And so there's no shortage of material and the ways I've done this wrong. And also just in, just learning from others around me. I also, now that I have teen girls especially, know that attention spans are shorter than ever. And so each of those tips is honestly just a story. It's fun, it's engaging, and then there's just a hard-hitting truth at the end. So it was a lot of fun to write too. I wrote a fiction series a couple of years ago, and it reignited in me that creative side, that love of story and understanding of how we learn best through story. And so I wanted to incorporate that into this book, which meant it was months and months of having to sit my butt in a chair and be diligent to do the work. So thank you for that encouragement.
Yeah, absolutely. I can totally see how God has worked through your faithfulness with your butt in that chair writing, girl. You've helped so many people. And I have a little sister who's, oh my gosh, now she's 18. I hate to say that, but she's a senior in high school, and I just look at her life and I take myself back to what life was like for me in that time. And it's just so wild how things have drastically changed, how we've been speaking about. And, it's sad to see, but it's also empowering to see, because we do see that God has made them for such a time as this, to kind of take back that power that you're talking about. I'm curious to know, has your opinion on some of these stances, or how you do your ministry, or how you address these certain conversations, has that changed since you've had girls of your own?
Yes, absolutely. It makes it, as each post that I post, every book that I write now is, I'm writing this for someone else's daughter, someone they love so dearly, the way that I love my own dear girls. And so it raises the stakes for me. It makes the stakes higher. But also just the way that I talk with girls and interact with girls. One of the first books that I wrote for teen girls, was almost 15 years ago now. And when I read that, I'm like, wow, just the way that we approach these things is so different. The things that we took for granted before, and now it's like, oh, that's going to come across real different now because of the things our culture is facing now.
Yeah. And can't say that now. Right.
That's exactly right. Yeah. Yeah. So there's, both, but I would love to hear from you how you've seen things change from between when you were a senior in high school and now with your younger sister.
Well, I would like to say it wasn't that long ago for me, but it's like the years have gone by quicker and quicker each year that I'm out of high school and out of college. Just the way that social media has really taken over. I mean, you were talking about boundaries with your girls and having phones and signing a contract. First of all, I think that's genius. I think I need to write one with myself because I am addicted to my phone. And I've been saying, like, I really do need to get a bedtime. And this is just confirmation for me that, like, as an adult, it's good to have a bedtime, you know? But just the way that whenever I got a phone as, a 10-year-old, it was a little flip phone, but it was really just so my parents could get in contact with me whenever I was at after school care. And I did not care about that thing. You know, half the time I didn't even know where it was, you know, and then I get in trouble for not being responsible with my phone, you know. But nowadays, kids are completely glued to that. You know, I remember knocking on doors to be like, can Brooke play? Is my neighbor home? You know, having that interaction. And my little sister doesn't really have that as a high schooler. You know, that's not in the norm. I think she does an incredible job. She is such a fantastic human. I'm just so proud to be her sister. If you're listening, shout out to you, girl. So she does a great job of being connected with people. She also has, you know, a lot of faith and foundation of the Lord in her life. But through her stories, I've been able to hear how parents that don't have those boundaries that we were given as kids, how social media has really taken over their life in the bullying, in the passing of inappropriate photos, you know, just how these tiny things that were meant to connect people across the globe is really tearing down these girls' confidence. And so it's been sad to see as a sister, but it's also really been, in a way, kind of an odd blessing because we've been able to have those conversations of how do we protect ourselves or how can we be a light. She's such a great example of that, of how to be a light in dark places, of how do we reach out to those girls who are struggling with that, who don't have parents to put those boundaries in places, and give those girls agency to say, even though my parents didn't give me those boundaries, I can make those boundaries for myself. And what does that look like? You know, how can we be a light? And so I'm curious, how do your girls work with that? Because I'm sure, you know, it's got to be hard sometimes having boundaries that other kids don't have. How do they have those conversations with their classmates?
Yeah, that it is difficult when you feel like you're the only one. And so a little background, when my girls were younger, they kind of got a blessing of having a like an old school childhood because we lived up at a camp in the mountains and there was no cell service.
Oh my gosh.
And so until they were in junior high, like they couldn't even have a phone. And when they got to high school and we moved to the big city, they were like, oh, we've got to have Snap. We've got to have this or that. It's the only way my classmates are communicating. And so that was hard. That was a hard transition at first for them to feel like they were, you know, missing out. But we tried, my goal was for them to feel connected. And so it was like, okay, well, if we're not going to do that app, what can we do so that you feel connected? So she started some group chats with her friends, you know, that she could communicate that way. We did do Be Real for a while to where it was, you know, a little bit of a nice, gentler entry into that world. And so that was like enough connection where they didn't feel like they were completely missing out. And now really, I feel like they are sort of they're deciding which boundaries are healthy for them, which I love. Like that's the goal all around, and all along. And so, the interesting thing is, I think because I'm old enough to know what it was like before cell phones completely, there was always a sense of I'm on the outside. I think every girl feels this to some extent through all of history. You feel like you don't necessarily completely belong with the group.
Yeah.
And so that's not a new phenomenon. And so I'm trying to help my girls understand, like, you're going to feel that to some extent, probably no matter what. Even if you're on those social media platforms that your friends are on, you're still going to feel a little bit that way. So let's shift our focus a little bit on, like, how do you feel complete and whole as a person? What hobbies are you going to get into and meet people in real life, right? So one of my girls is big into horses, and she's met a couple girls at the farm who now she has real in-person, you know, relationships with them, and they just go and have fun and hang out with their horses. And, you know, I feel like it's different for every kid, but I have been proud of the way that they've navigated it and learned that their identity does not depend on being on social media all the time.
Absolutely. And it's wonderful because you're giving them tools that not only will help them as they're growing up in the teen world, right? But once they, age into adulthood, because if we don't deal with these things in that time, and of course, how you're saying, we're always in some kind of way are going to feel like that throughout our lives, throughout the different seasons, right? But you've given them the tools on how to accomplish a healthy life, how to hear those lies and combat them with truth. And it's just so beautiful to hear your passion, not only for your girls, but for teen girls as a group. How has God continued to bring you back to minister to this really special group?
I think it's my hopeless optimism. Like, I just really believe, in teen and early 20s, you're making some of the biggest decisions of your life, right? Like, it really does help shape the trajectory of where you're going to go. And so I feel that if we can give girls the tools at that age to understand the power of choice, to understand how to have healthy relationships with guys, but also with family and with friends, and how to have priorities, how to cast a vision for your life. If we can give them those tools at that age, it really can change the trajectory of their lives for the better. And like you said, we don't grow out of age-wise, we don't grow out of those three big questions that we're asking as girls. We can only grow into them through the power of the Spirit and understanding who we are. So I feel like the earlier we can do that, then the more we can be about God's kingdom and his business the rest of our lives, instead of, questioning, am I beautiful at 60, finally, being able to instead invest in the next generation and invest in the community instead of being so self-focused.
You talk about the power of choice, and it's hard to not be self-focused when everybody's like, your truth, your life, what are you going to do, So how do we navigate choice? There's so much power in that, but sometimes it can feel so overwhelming, and I'm sure that you've heard that from so many girls. You talked earlier about the pressure, just the pressure of society. How do we navigate that in a good way and in a way that honors the Lord?
I do hear that a lot. And it's always been hard to make decisions, like the big life decisions, where am I going to go to school? Who, should I marry this guy? Should I be in a relationship? Those are hard things, but it goes back to God's word. It goes back to knowing scripture, having wise counsel, people in your life that you can bounce ideas off of and to get that, real life feedback. And then to just take some of the pressure off and remember that there is not a single tiny bullseye to God's will for your life that you have to hit, or else you're going to screw up the rest of your life. Like, God's not holding his breath, hoping
Right.
like, I hope she makes the right choice. Like, the ultimate goal, honestly, is just to love God and to love others. And we can do that in so many different careers and so many different locations, whether we're in the perfect relationship or not. Like, we can love God and love others. And so part of the power of choice is really realizing you can just make a choice, and, based on your preference, based on the circumstances, as long as you're, praying about it and seeking wise counsel. But to realize, like, there's that bullseye is so crippling to feel like you have to make the perfect choices all the time.
Absolutely. Did you have somebody, a mentor that you're speaking about, that walked you through your youth and kind of breathed wisdom into you like you're breathing into other girls?
I was blessed to grow up. My mom became a Christian when I was just a couple years old. And so I was blessed to have a mom who was not only a believer, but who was learning and growing like throughout my childhood. And so watching her life was really instrumental for me. But I do think a lot of the wisdom that I gleaned was through reading books. And I'm just kind of making this connection now, but I was big into reading nonfiction books, even as a late teen and especially early 20s. And so I learned from a lot of, other believers who were up ahead, who had walked through those seasons. And maybe that's part of why I'm passionate about, creating these resources for those coming up behind me.
That's wonderful. And I can't imagine how many young women's lives that you've just completely changed for the better. And when this came across my desk, I was just like, wow, this is powerful. This is awesome. This is something that we're not seeing but there's such a need for, and so for you to be able to stand in the gap for these young women, and for some women who maybe aren't categorized as young women anymore like me, who needed that as a teen, but it's not too late and they get to hear it now. And so I think it's so beautiful the way that you're changing lives. And I want to touch on your website. I was just completely blown away when I checked this out the other day. You guys, it's lifeloveandgod.com. I love it because there's a Q&A section over here. There's an Ask Jessie section. You can go and you can actually ask her a question and she will answer it, whatever you're going through. Her About section. We got her cool stuff section. Oh my gosh. Favorite books for teens, things you're listening to, just ways to be influenced, but in such a good, wholesome, and Christian way. I've just never seen an amazing website that's just so thorough in all of the things. And so you guys go check out her website and also go buy her book, Your Brightest Life by Jessie Minassian. There's tips for navigating relationships, health, faith, mindset, and more. There is truly no boundary that she really doesn't cover in her 70 tips. And Jessie, I just want to thank you so much for being on the program with us today, just sharing your heart and sharing your love for teen girls, and also just for wisdom and for light and just having a brighter life and not letting life pass us by. Is there anything that you would like to leave our listeners with, or maybe a hope that you have for them as they read your novel?
Well, I want to say thank you, Jordan. This has been so fun. Thank you just for your passion and your care for others. And I would say ditto all those nice things back to you. And then for those listening, I would just say, look, you only get one life. Like, make it a bright one. Get out there and live it and enjoy it and bring God glory in it. And don't overthink it. But I'd love to help you on your journey, or to be there to gift to someone that you love, a student, a daughter, a cousin, a young woman in your life.
That is so beautiful. Jessie, thank you so much for being on the program with us today. You're such a joy. Hey guys, if you haven't already liked, comment, and subscribed, we would love for you to. We will see you next time on Live Today Live, and have a wonderful rest of your day.
You don't have to go anywhere or be in any specific place. It is the believing of the heart. It is